Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Discard for Magic. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron.
I'm your other host, James or Jexic, and today we have two guests on today to talk about deck building. We have GameBear and Cheezits.
Yeah, hi, I'm GameBear. My name is Justin, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm Cheezits, and my name is Dave.
Welcome, guys. So why don't you just start out and give us a little introduction to how you found the game. GameBear, why don't you go first?
Sure. I actually first heard about Summoner Wars through the HeroScape community back when it first came out. I hope you guys don't get mad about this answer, but I actually dismissed it initially because it just seemed like a lesser substitute for HeroScape. A couple years ago, I was looking for a new game to play, and Tom Vassell on Dice Tower was raving about the second edition, so I decided to give it a shot, and Dave and I have been playing it since then.
What appealed to you about the game at first?
You know, we've played some other deck building games. Again, like Tom Vassell did mention the deck building aspect. Dave and I both enjoyed playing games where we have more ability to innovate, I guess. So we jumped in. Actually, when we first started playing, shortly after Summoner Wars was released, the second edition, so there weren't that many decks. You couldn't really do deck building according to the rules. So we just started building illegal decks. We ignored the symbols and did our own thing, because that was always the aspect that appealed to us the most.
So it was almost like how in HeroScape you could put anything together. You were just putting anything together in Summoner Wars?
Yes. So we'd play all the base factions a few times just to get to know them. And then every time new sets come out, we do the same thing. We'll play the base decks a few times just to get to know the cards, and then we'll jump right back into deck building again.
What were some of the decks you built before there were deck building options, like with just the master set? What were some of the combos you tried to make then?
Man, Dave, do you remember? I mean,
I remember my goal was to hypnotic call one of his high value guys, and then mind control it, and then use renewed hope to turn it into a loot. That was just my goal, in case you guys haven't figured it out. Winning, of course, is fun, but I like pulling off ridiculous things that have, and that's what brings it, just puts a smile on my face, less of the nuanced part of the game, but more of just like trying to do crazy shit. That's the thing that makes the deck building fun, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what your combo was, but there was one of those illegal decks where Dave lined up to roll more than 20 dice, and ever since then, that's been his goal with the legal decks, is to get back there, and he finally did with the Selendar deck.
Oh, you know what it was? I remember now. It was double Ice Smith, double Hellforged weapon on something. I can't remember what I put it on. And then I blasted it across the board and then rolled like a ton of dice against you. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't a machinist. I don't know, but it was awesome.
When do you guys think that the releases actually caught up and you were able to make cool decks with what was actually illegal?
I mean, it had to be after we had at least a second deck for most of the symbols, whenever that was.
Yeah, so maybe like Eternal Council, Fungal Dwarves period.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Probably got started building legal decks maybe halfway through the second round of symbols. By then we were full swing.
Yeah, I feel like once you got to like cloaks and avians, not because of the avians, but the cloaks really opened up a lot for the cave goblins, and by that time you had some cool stuff you could do with tundra orcs and stuff, and the cave goblins themselves. Putting dagger in sneaks was a lot of fun.
Yes, I've enjoyed that very much.
Dagger in Sneaks is fantastic. I mean, the real joy of Sneaks is the Tundra Orcs Brutal Force. Seems like you guys still have to explore that a little bit. I haven't seen you guys use that a whole lot.
My Sneaks is different. I don't build assassin decks where I fly across the board and do crazy stuff. That's Dave's department. I do boring stuff.
You guys need a little bit of history between me and Justin, because Justin, his goal is to smother you and make you hate life. And no matter what he does, whatever the game is, he wants me to forfeit just because it's so hopeless, right? So early on, he gravitated towards Sneaks, and that's what he would do to me over and over. I probably lost like 20 or 30 games against Sneaks, so I just cannot use Sneaks. I just hate it so much just because he traumatized me so bad,
It's one of the different aspects, I think, of Summoner Wars is that playing Sneaks in certain ways is all about smothering the board and preventing someone from being able to summon and destroying their gates and stuff like that, which almost feels like a control strategy in another game. But here, people think of it as being aggressive because you're actually attacking and moving forward. But sometimes, like, taking away someone's ability to summon or do what they want, it can be definitely a different sort of experience and less fun sometimes. Especially when you're, I guess when you play combos like you and you're just like, I just want to have fun and do the cool thing. And here you are just trying to, ruin that.
I don't know. I'm having fun.
Justin, have you experimented at all with like the high elves in deck building?
Yes, I have some.
Prophet had a really good deck.
My Prophet hasn't really been active in deck building this season,
He hasn't been in the base queue either. I think he's just waiting for tournaments to play in.
so I'm not that familiar with his deck. I have played with high elves. I do like them. I haven't played them that much online. I do enjoy tormenting Dave with them.
They can have like deceivers and mind witches and peace. Like peace plus deceiver is just brutal.
The deck I've been playing most online has been a Kaldak deck, the Fungal Dwarves.
Ooh, I love some Fungal Dwarves.
Don't get too excited.
That's the first deck building deck I played was Fungal Dwarves.
Do you play with Blood Summon? I got the impression that that's been a popular way to play Fungal Dwarves, and I've never done that either.
I was never a big Blood Summon guy. I more just loved adding the other carriers in.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just like carrier swarming. I think I had like one Blood Summon in my deck just cuz, but I was never someone who like built my deck around Blood Summon or used it a whole lot. I think my last iteration that I used with the Fungal Dwarves, I had Black Saber in there as one of my champs. And Blood Summon, because you can Blood Summon Black Saber. So that's a fun interaction. And also you can just Blood Summon off Black Saber to just use the health. So I used that a little bit. I think the last time I played that deck, that was actually against you, James, in one of the last Shibata tournaments.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, maybe a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't played that deck in a while. I pivoted when the actual tournaments came out to a Cave Goblin deck that I played. For the most part, that's all I played in deck building. I did play a Forge deck for a little bit this season. That was interesting.
Yeah, we haven't seen you on deck building in a while, actually. What's your excuse?
Busy. I've not been playing as much deck building.
He'll make a rush at the end to try to get to the top spot.
Yeah, I often will just push for like position, but I played Cheezits a couple times early on. I don't know GameBear if we played maybe once or twice, but played a couple times against Cheezits Blood Summon deck, and then I played Turtle Freak a couple times, and then I was trying out a couple new things in my Cave Goblin deck, and I was trying out my Forge deck, and after I did that for a bit, I kind of just sat with it for a little bit. I don't play as much with all the like different games going on with tournaments and private games with leagues and stuff. I don't play as much with the public queues as a lot of people do.
Sure, it makes sense.
But I do try and push like towards the end of the seasons for certain things. Like I try to be Fungal Dwarves #1 every time. Like I'll try and push into top 10 with both custom decks and base decks. Well, it's custom decks #1 a couple times. I've never gotten it close to base deck #1. They go hard over there.
Speaking of that, I think it's interesting that Dave, it looks like he hasn't played a single base decks game online.
That has just recently changed.
Oh.
Dave's really having a great time. We want to talk about that, Dave.
That's fine. So Justin and I, we've been trying to get healthy. So we have these bets going on with our weight, trying to lose some weight here and there. And so he won the last one, and I'm supposed to play base decks until I get a winning record, but I'm super impatient. I have to win like 5 in a row. I've been doing Baron, and I'm just hating life right now. Compared to deck building, base is just a lot more nuanced and a lot more like chess, and I just don't have the patience, especially if I have like 10 queued up at the same time. I'm just trying to get through the stupid bet. I just lost another one today over like an oversight. I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I lost that game.
So what I'm hearing is that custom decks is easier and more welcoming than base decks.
I guess for me,
I think it's a great story. I think it's just cool that you guys, you maybe played like a few games in season 3, and here you are in season 4. When I remember when you asked you guys to do this, you were like #1 and 2 custom deck queue, and I think it'll probably change now, and it probably will by the time the thing releases, because Dave, you'll often be #1. You'll get to the #1 slot and then get bored with the deck you're playing. So for you, it doesn't seem to be as much about the ranking as just enjoying whatever deck you're playing.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty nicely, I think.
You let James get to #1 before the podcast out of niceness to us. I appreciate it.
Well, there's not a lot of people playing, deck builder, right? And so I went on vacation, and it was kind of I had a lot of alone time on this vacation, so I queued up like a ton of deck builder games. My Selendar deck was just convenient, right? So I just played a ton of Selendar games when I was on vacation, and then when I got back, I looked at the ranking and I was way up there, and I was like, oh. And then I noticed that people stopped. I don't know if it was, like the play anyone versus a fair match. I wasn't getting matched up with many people. So then I was like, screw it. Let me just stop playing the Selendar deck, mess around with other things, And now I got tons of deck builder games, and so I'm happier. I just can't use Selendar, I guess.
A question about that. You've kind of iterated a bit on that Shadow Elves deck. What is like your favorite build of it, do you think? Is your latest iteration the favorite, or just kind of where you ended up?
That's a good question. Probably, well, the original one that I started with, that one was not so great. But I'll just say there's the Blood Summon version that had Renewed Hope in it. I played that one probably the most. Messed around mixing Blood Summon and Purge. And then the last version doesn't have Blood Summon at all, just using Deathrite and Sage Rangers. And, that was that game that I came across the board, Jaxic, that I remember you were like, that's janky. I'm like, yeah, it is janky, but it's kind of funny. I don't know which one's my favorite. They're all pretty strong. It's hard to know because honestly, a lot of the really strong decks from the previous seasons weren't playing deck builder, so I have no idea how any of these would work against any of the previous tournament winning decks or things that you guys know about. Yeah, I was just playing Brub over and over again for the most part.
Yeah, we probably have like 80 games or something played or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous. I'm just like afraid of Brub.
I think you still have a winning record against me overall. And I think I did slightly better with the Brub deck than other decks, so I kind of kept leaning into that.
So Jaxic and Aaron, I mean, you guys have been around for a few seasons. How would you say this deck stacks up against the other strong decks? What would you say are the top deck building decks?
Ooh.
Aaron can think about it for a second, but I would say like yours, especially if you haven't faced it before, your decks are very hard to defend against. Because I would get to situations where I'd put champions around my summoner or a gate or all this stuff, and like I'd be totally holed in. I'd be like, I'm safe now. I was like, nope, you're not. I'll into darkness your blocker or your gate or your drudger that's protecting your summoner or whatever, or using purge to kill something or Deathrite or whatever, like all these different tricks, or like you'll kill the blocker with an attack and then use Renewed Hope to summon something 3 times, kill my summoner, and then finish off with Demand. Once you get a hand that's big enough, it's hard to counter. I think it just became a race with that clock of like, okay, he's got 12 cards now. I probably need to win now or else I'm toast, Like, if Aaron has any thoughts about how it stacks up against the other decks.
I think there's probably like a couple top decks, and then there's like a very strong next tier. I think Blood Summon's probably the top deck, like a Blood Summon Selendar, similar to what you're running. The only decks that I think maybe compete with it, Prophet's deck was really, really strong, and honestly, Blood Summon might do poorly against it because Prophet would just flood the battlefield with unkillable units, which would be tough to Blood Summon through. I also think the Cave Goblin decks are really high up there. Sabata had a really good Savannah Elves deck that was really strong and almost made it to the finals in the last tournament. Ascariel had a really strong Cloaks deck. Cloaks are interesting because they can really adapt to whatever matchup. They can go really econ heavy and do like scavs and parapets and stuff, or they can go really aggressive with like dancers and climbers and like get really up in your face really quickly, really fast. Fungal Dwarves are also up there for a top deck. Tundra Orcs too.
Even a non-summon Fungal Dwarf, or even a non-blood summon Fungal Dwarves deck, like probably like GameBear is running, like Purse Warden used to do, because those will just put so many bodies in the way that it might be hard for you to get through them with your combo.
Deck building feels more rock paper scissors esque in the fact that like, oh, if you're running a ton of unit deck that's like hard to kill, like a Fungal Dwarf or like a Prophet's deck, then you might do better against Blood Summon, but you might leave yourself open to like a Brub TO deck. And so the decks, based off the matchups, some just do better and kind of have that rock, paper, scissors effect in the top tier. So it's tough to pick one that's just like, oh, this one's easily the best, but I would probably lean towards Blood Summon as being the strongest. Before, Dave, you started playing the Blood Summon decks, I didn't see a lot of uniqueness in the Blood Summon decks. It was just, all right, we got a bunch of warriors, we got Blood Summon, maybe a Demand, but you added a lot of wrinkles into it with like Renewed Hope and like different aspects of like that I had not seen before I was seeing your decks in play.
Yeah, I will say, Aaron, you need to get some games in against his newest iteration because I do think it's the strongest of his, whether it's his favorite or not.
The one without Blood Summon?
Yeah.
Really? I'm definitely down to play.
I think Dave's was winning over 90% of his games with the newest iteration. Again, with accepting that a lot of the top players not on there and not facing the top decks, but its ability to punch through defenses. Jexic alluded to that a bit. If he gets to his combo, it's really hard to defend against.
And that's the thing is, like, you mentioned earlier that Cave Goblin, like, the way I play is more, like, assassination heavy than the way you play. But my deck's really interesting in the fact that, like, most of my games go to time. So, like, it has definitely ways to, like, get that one-turn kill, that assassination win. A lot of the games I find go the length and go the distance, and I win actually on econ. Not the games I played against your Blood Summon decks, that's for sure, but a lot of the games that I played against, like Vanguards or like Tundra Orcs, or James and I have had tons of games that come down to our last units and our summoners. It's whoever won that econ battle.
Probably just like the addition of Boldo and Dagger that allow you to kind of play a longer game because you have a better use for your magic.
Yeah, the champs in my deck are really what allow me to play that econ without Baldo and Dagger, allowing me to maneuver and pull units back to get more use out of them. And having like Unrelenting, 2 Unrelentings helps too. But it all depends on the way they come up too. If I get 2 Unrelentings and Dagger and Baldo in my first hand, gonna be a lot harder to play that econ game.
I gotta tell you guys that, these long games where you're going through your deck slowly and you're referring to them as like econ games, right? And you're just like watching every card and doing all that stuff. I'm fine with doing that, but I gotta tell you, when the determining winner is who rolls dice better, it's kind of frustrating. You know what I mean? Because you're like card versus card. And you're like, all right, I should get this guy because I'm rolling so many dice, but then you have some atrocious die roll. And then if you can't recover, that's pretty much the game, right? Like, and I'm just like, that part of it is a little frustrating, I'm sure to lots of people when you're like, oh, I just rolled 1 for 7 arrows. What was that all about?
I had a game a long time ago against another player who did a very interesting Shadow Elves game. His tag was like DS-GameBear or something like that, but I said for a while that was like my favorite game that I'd seen. He did a Shadow Elves build where he had Ovi and a bunch of other stuff, but he got a big hand like you did, Dave. But what he did is he summoned Ovi with that huge hand, attacked with it, then bounced Ovi back to his hand, and then had a Citadel Archer in the back, discard like 8 cards. He shot like 17 dice, maybe 20 dice at Grognak, but didn't kill him, got me down to like 3 life. And then I ended up winning with like Brutal Force or something the following turn. And I felt bad because I was like, this guy probably left this game after doing the coolest combo because I haven't seen him since.
Well, it's really funny you say that, because the Ovi Citadel Archer thing, that was actually something I was messing around with. I don't know if you guys, if I played you guys when I was trying to play the Vanguards, but I was like, oh, I'm going to play Citadel Archers, all this card drawing, and then I'm going to get like all these champions out. And so I would do that. I'd run through my deck, and then the champions wouldn't kill anything. I'd just be like out of units,
Yeah, I know for a while, this was a bit ago, but Ben was running a really weird deck where he just blasts through all of his cards and then has Katu out like turn 3 and then just tries to like survive. He has like 14 cards still in hand and he just tries to survive with Katu and Edia and a bunch of units. It was a very interesting concept. He won some games with it too. I don't know what his overall record was, but
I was just thinking that level 3 CPU also had a Blood Summon Call Forth deck in Shadow Elves, but he would also run Katu and some Blood Shamans, just so that if he wants to, he could just shift all the boosts from Solundar over to Katu in the mid game. That was kind of a cheeky one. We haven't asked Justin what some of his favorite deck builds are. You've been at the top spot too.
I'm not doing anything as creative as what Dave's doing, so I'm just playing. Half my deck building games have been the Fungal Dwarves, and the other half has just been a mix. Cave Goblins, some Eternal Council, some High Elves, and then a few other random games. I like control decks. I like playing aggressively, and those decks let me do that. So nothing particularly special about any of my decks, right? Like the Fungal Dwarves, I've just got some extra carriers in there. Cave Goblins, just a whole bunch of zero-cost units, just doing normal stuff.
So there's definitely room to do different sorts of builds, because you can have these crazy combo decks, but you can also just try to make a good value deck or a control deck, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the benefits of deck building is you get to build a deck that matches your play style versus trying to adjust the way you play to match the deck.
Yeah, I think that's well said. What would you guys recommend to anyone who's looking to start in deck building?
Maybe just look at a tournament, pick a deck to try. I think it's a bit of an obstacle to have somebody who's new to deck building, have them try to build something from scratch and then get matched up against somebody who's got a lot of experience. I think if people had some choices of starting points, it'd make it a little bit easier to jump in.
Do you think that's the biggest barrier to deck building is like initial hurdle of like, I don't know what to do for a deck and I don't know if it's going to be good and I get matched up against these people who've been playing these decks for months now?
I don't know if it's the biggest barrier, but I certainly think it is one of the barriers. It's an extra work you have to do before you start a game. Create at least one deck before you jump in. Taking that away where people can try deck building just to try decks that are different from the base decks. And then after that, if they like it, then they can decide to put in the effort to build their own things. I think it'd help a little bit.
So did you guys have experience playing a lot of other games where you did that kind of thing before? And is that just something you kind of enjoyed and wanted to port over to here?
We've played a lot of games, but we sort of just play one game at a time and play it for a couple of years and then move on and find another game to play.
I guess what I'm asking, what are some of those games you guys have played in the past that you've enjoyed?
The one we played before this one was, I think, Architects of the West Kingdom. Are you two familiar with that at all?
No.
I've heard of it. I don't know what it is, but I haven't played it.
There are many different strategies you can pursue. Take a path that suits your playstyle again. For that, Great Western Trail. We played Dominion a long time ago. Dungeon Lords.
Dungeon Lords?
That's going way back. We had a great time with Dungeon Lords. That's a crazy game to play 2-player.
Oh, Dungeon Lords is brutal. It's one of the few worker placement games I like because it's just so nasty.
Did you ever play 2-player?
No, but you have to be so tight with your resource counting and stuff, basically. Like, if you're short of gold or whatever, you could just, you mess up your whole round, I seem to remember.
Yeah.
But in 2-player, what, is there like a dummy player or something?
No. Talk about jumping into the deep end. You're essentially playing two characters or whatever you call them.
And then you just add your score up for the 2 dungeons you've built?
I don't even remember. Dave, do you remember? It's been so long.
It's so long ago, I don't remember. I barely remember that game.
During the pandemic, we actually worked together and designed a game. So that's also, I guess, another topic. It's a miracle that we're still friends after that experience.
We're just really different. What he thinks is fun, I think is boring. And what I think is fun, he thinks is too overpowered. Surprise.
Strikingly, yeah, you guys would have different ideas about design.
But you guys like a lot of the same games. You just find different aspects of that game to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, we like games that have high levels of interaction and lots of variability in them, I guess. I don't know how else to put it.
Have you guys played, do you have any history in playing like Magic?
I don't.
I did play Magic a long time ago, just casually. I think it was around 4th edition Ice Age, like during that period of time.
That's when I first played too, actually.
I just played with my friends. We didn't do anything. I didn't do anything crazy or anything like that. It was fun. I liked it.
Yeah, I never played like a whole lot of it, but that's a part of an aspect that I feel like is akin to deck building is like if you enjoy the combo building in Magic, you could definitely do stuff like that in deck building in Summoner Wars. Like, hey, I built this deck around this combo, and now I'm going to see if I can actually get it to work. I feel like a lot of my friends who played Magic did a lot of that when they were playing in Magic. They're like, all right, I got this real broken combo in my deck somewhere. Let's see if I can get it to pan out.
Totally. Yeah. No, it was fun. I liked it.
You played that for a couple years and moved on. So we're glad you got you now, because in a year and a half you're gonna be gone.
Well, I guess it depends. If there's a lot of people playing deck builder, right? Like at a certain point, I almost felt like I was just playing by myself. If there's gonna be a lot of players, it can be a lot of fun. Like I think Justin and I, we talked about it and we're like, and actually his wife mentioned it too. She said, oh, I'm surprised you guys are still playing this game. It's been a while. And it's only because of deck building, right? Like if the deck building wasn't part of the game, we probably would have gotten bored a long time ago. But because of the deck building aspect and then all the new factions that come out, there's just like tons of things to explore, right?
Right, there's always something new to play with. Yeah.
Yeah, no spoiler, but I think there's gonna be some cool stuff for you in the Shimmer Sea Fae.
Yeah, I think there will be too. But I'm interested to hear you guys' perspective because deck building worked a little different in first edition. And like the app in first edition, everybody deck built. Like there wasn't any base decks. Like nobody played base decks in first edition really because it worked a little bit different. So in first edition, you didn't build off deck building symbols like they have it with now, which are based off like how the decks work and mechanics and like the premise and how the feel is and stuff like that. It was based only off factions. So like you could build Phoenix Elf units with Phoenix Elf units, and there was like 2 summoners and reinforcement packs, and there was mercenaries you could build into any deck, just like there are now, but there was a lot more of them. There was an entire mercenary faction.
And all your events were locked in. So if you played Sneaks and he has those 9 events, they're never changing. So that was a big difference too. You can only swap in units.
I don't know. I think the way they have it now is better.
Yeah. I think I agree with that.
You get more variety. I never played first edition, but at least that's my impression based on your description, that there's more variety in the way they have it now, and as they keep adding more factions, there's going to be even more variety, year over year.
I think that the way they have it is really good. I just, like you said, I just wish we could get more folks to give it a shot or stick around with it. But I have noticed more new names when I do queue lately. I haven't been queuing as much in deck building, so maybe I'm part of the problem. But I just want the next big tournament to show up so we can all try the decks we've built and then see what's next after that.
Is that how it usually works? They do like a season-ending tournament and then it starts over?
Usually they start it earlier in the season, like probably like a month after the season starts. They'll start a deck building tournament and a base deck tournament, and then they'll probably finish around the time the season ends. But because with the app launch, whatever else is going on, they haven't done those tournaments. Kind of missed that. But luckily, Tortugatron has stepped up and ran some other tournaments. And so I tried to get you guys to make a team for the Ciabatta, the CBCB8.
I have no idea. Like, you probably caught us early on when we first got on, and we were just learning.
Still finding our way.
I just thought it'd be good to see because you were asking that question, how your decks would fare against some of the other top decks. I think that might have been a good way to find out.
Some top teams in there. James has his own team, and I got my own team, and
there's one other team. Not that many people signed up for it.
So what do you guys think is the problem with how come there's not as many people playing Deck Builder as base?
I think part of it is that some people come to this game to avoid deck building now. You know what I mean? Like, they may be burned by Magic or some other game where that was a big part of it. And they're just like, I like that this is just a pick up and play kind of thing.
Some people also just try and bang out games, like Magnifico, who plays a lot of Grokes at the moment and has played a lot of Obsidian Dwarves and other factions in the past, just shoot a bunch of games with one base faction and doesn't want to think about like building a deck and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. That makes me, again, think that providing a bunch of canned deck building decks would presumably make it easier for people like that to jump in, right?
Yeah.
They hit a button like, let's see some suggestions. Like, here's, Cheezits Wacky Saloondar. Here's James's Tundra Orcs. Like, give it a shot. See how you do.
Maybe we should suggest something because they're coming out with like a website for Summoner Wars, and maybe they should have like a deck building tab on the website where people can share like their wacky builds and stuff and share like their decks. So people could just hop on there and like, oh, I want to try this deck out and like port it over.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, especially with the ability to port the links, because people could submit decks and then someone could just take the deck, which wouldn't bother me because I still think that, especially like some of the combos that Dave's pulled off, it's like, I think just having one of his decks, you wouldn't necessarily know what to do with it the first time you played it. So I think there's less danger of it just being like, oh, pick the net deck and win kind of thing. I feel like there's still a lot to be played with a good deck that we have, You still got to play the games.
Yeah, and the decks are all public knowledge, especially now that you can click on your opponent and see what's in their deck. So it's not like it's like, oh, my deck should be a secret and that gives me an advantage. That's not an aspect really in this game.
Well, I don't remember who did it, but somebody tried my Selendar deck, and I was playing my Eternal Council deck, and he comboed me with my own combo. And I was like, son of a... Like, that really came out of nowhere. And of course, Justin was like so happy for me to get a piece of my own medicine. Just like so thrilled.
So now you want Justin to get choked out by a high elf deck.
I would actually love that. Anytime I see Justin struggle and get sad, it makes me so happy. It really does. He seems like such a nice guy, but he's so mean. He is such a mean person.
Anyway.
That is a good idea, though, about maybe trying to get a deck building database or something on the Plaid Hat.
Yeah, because like on the base side, not only do you not have to put any work, but you've got 22 right now you've got 22 different decks you can play. On the deck building side, why not have at least 22 decks over there that you can just jump right into? Like, you have so many choices, not just the no work, but you have so many choices on the base side. And you don't have anything until you build something on the deck building side.
And level 3 CPU tried to do something like that, sort of. He made like a PowerPoint that had like all the notable decks probably about 6 months ago, and it had like 15 decks on it or something. But it wasn't really like it's just pinned in a like deck building in the Discord, and it's not super easy to find. And then in the PowerPoints, you have to look in the notes to find the deck links, and so there's a lot of steps to actually find one of those decks. So I think just making them more accessible to people would help people join the deck building community.
Like that spreadsheet is an awesome resource, but it doesn't really help somebody brand new to the online scene.
Maybe we could even just like pin a post in the deck building thread on Discord to just like have links to the decks themselves, so you could copy and paste it with some of the decks. Does that make sense?
No, that could be a good idea.
They still have to be on the Discord.
If you're on the Discord, you're experienced.
Yeah, you really need something built into the app, into the online interface. I've been playing more base decks than deck building recently, but I started a deck building game a couple days ago, and I feel bad. I got matched up with clearly a brand new player playing a base deck on the deck building side. He went first, and after we'd each taken one turn each, the game was basically over. I didn't feel very welcoming with that one.
Yeah, and that happens occasionally. I don't know if people just don't realize what deck building is or click the wrong button. I've clicked the wrong button once and did a custom deck. I did a base deck sneaks against a fungal dwarf deck building. I actually won that game in like 3 turns, but that's a different story.
I lost a game once against Escariel, who accidentally put a base cloak stack against my Tundra Orcs, and I lost.
But a lot of the players who do that are like just brand new players, and
Yeah.
it feels tough. There was even in the last tournament, there was like 2 or 3 players out of the like 36 or like 40, whatever, how many players we had in the tournament, brought a base deck on accident or on purpose, I don't know. But one of them brought like base Wayfarers and didn't win a game. And I don't think they had any that were super close because base Wayfarers just didn't do that well against most of the deck building decks. So
Yeah, makes sense.
How long did you guys play together before you jumped online?
About 2 years.
Okay, yeah.
Late 2021, we first started playing Summoner Wars.
The master set and starter set there.
Just playing each other. I mean, I think Dave's already played more games online than we probably played in those entire 2 years. Play so many more games online when you can queue up multiple at a time.
You guys still play a lot in person?
Yeah, we do. In person it's different. We still try wacky stuff, play bad decks.
Do you still play illegal decks in person?
We haven't done that in a while. We did just talk about thinking it'd be fun to have a sort of an intermediate format. Pick a base deck and you can swap out one event, one type of event or one type of common, or say swap out all the heroes without restrictions.
There's been a couple talks about similar aspects. I don't know if you guys were around when this happened. Probably weren't online when it was. But one of the first tournaments they ran, maybe 3 or 4 tournaments in, that Plaid Hat ran, they ran a slight deck building tournament, and it was like 2 cards changed in like every deck.
Or maybe like swap one card out for something else.
But now also throw out the restrictions, right? So you can throw in any event or throw in any common. There are a lot of fun things you can do with the legal decks.
I haven't thought about it much, so I haven't thought about what the most broken thing you could do would be. There was also a limited deck building format that a guy proposed, Adamant 3 Run, who doesn't do as much deck building, but he does occasionally. He suggested where you can just swap 1 common, 1 champion, and 1 event out in all their copies, but still following the deck building rules. But the idea is just like something that's a little easier to wrap your head around in terms of building a deck.
Those are the kind of decks I feel like should be provided as a default just for new users, right? Like have those already made.
Yeah, we called that like a limited deck building thing, but I could see maybe I could even try to talk to Joe and maybe try to come up with what decks to suggest to people like that. It's like, oh, you like Tundra Orcs? Here, swap out this for Brub and your Shamans for Oathsworn and your, Freeze for Willpower. And now you've got a new deck that kind of does this thing instead,
We don't have enough power to do anything on the app, but we could see what Joe has ability to do. I'd really like the idea of like having default decks, at least like 1 per faction, of like, hey, you're new to deck building, like here's a good option for like a Wayfarer deck build or like a Cave Goblin deck build. I think that would really ease people into deck building. And then as they experience more of what other people are doing who have done more deck building, they can be like, oh, I want to change out this card, or oh, I want to change this from the deck. Or
right. And I think there's something to be said for having a critical mass too. I mean, there are a limited number of people that have been active in deck builder this season, which means you also end up facing the same thing a lot.
Yeah, but it's interesting because James and I did like guesstimation, a little bit of math involved of like how many people we think are on the base deck side a couple weeks ago, and it was like around 650. But if you take a look at like the deck building side, it's probably around like 30, maybe like 40, maybe up to 50, but it's just a drastic drop from that 650 that are active on the base deck side.
So it's a question of how we get that up. But like you're saying, if let's say you're newish and you're going on there, or even if you're not new, if you just played a bit and you're like, okay, I'm either gonna face Cheezits Shadow Elves deck or James's Brub deck, and I don't like facing either of those decks. What are the options then?
Right. Like you either need a lot more people to be playing, and I don't know how you do this, but try to incentivize the active players to play a wider variety of decks. Before we joined online, Dave and I ran our own little 2-person tournaments where we'd each come up with like 5 different decks and then either make a bracket or do a double elimination or something like that. So we don't generally like playing the same thing over and over again either.
Yeah, and that's interesting. The way they've done deck building tournaments in the past is just you take one deck, and I think that's a bit for ease of access, because if you have to build 5 decks, then I think a lot less people will join. But if they're like, oh, I just gotta make one deck.
Right. No, for a tournament that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Right. But for the season, again, like if you're a new player, this season there was a very good chance you're going to get matched up against Dave's Selendar deck.
Well, not anymore because I'm not playing it really.
Not anymore. And maybe it's a coincidence, but like there's been a lot more names in deck building since you stopped playing Selendar.
You said you started playing Savannah Elves and struggling a bit.
Oh my god! Like I was just...
That's an understatement.
Don't get me started. I was like, this deck has got to work, and then I just lost like 20 in a row, and I was like, this sucks.
I know you lost one of them to another Savannah Elves deck, if I recall correctly.
It's just like salt in the wound. There are just some things that don't mix with what you're trying to do, and so I abandoned that. So now I'm doing Forged, Eternal Council, and what's the other one?
I saw an Obsidian Dwarves deck. You faced me with my Obsidian Dwarves deck.
Yeah, Obsidian Dwarves. That's right. Those 3. I'm just like bouncing around, making micro changes to it, seeing if any of them are actually any good. But I'm, losing a ton of games.
It's weird. I feel like you would like Savannah Elves. They're a very combo-y deck, even like especially in deck building. Like you can get some crazy combos off of them, go across the board, and different aspects from Blood Summon, but similar to like a Selendar deck where you just roll a bunch of die with a combo.
That's what I thought too, but apparently doesn't work for me. I don't know. Units are too expensive. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't work. It has been interesting though, like running into a variety of decks, and I can always tell. I don't know if they're base deck players that are like are really good with like the defensive decks or what, but every once in a while I just miss Selendar so much because I'm like, this guy just built a fortress across the board, and if I go walk over there, he's gonna destroy me. So what am I supposed to do? If I'm Selendar, I know exactly what to do. But if I'm anything else, I'm like, it's an interesting thing to have to deal with, But it's also a little bit not fun to have to deal with.
Yeah, neither Dave nor I are really econ players, and we both are a bit of disdain for defensive play too. So we like to complain to each other.
Yeah, I remember you saying that like one of your goals was to try to get like a first turn kill, if possible.
Oh yeah, well, you did that, didn't you?
I did eventually, and I got like the 3rd turn kill against you the one time, and I was so excited about that because that was before you were on the forums or the Discord, and I was losing to you so much, and I was like, oh, and you were playing the Shadow Elves deck. I was like, okay, and I just got like a perfect hand and a lot of frenzies, and destroyed your gate, got you down to like 4 health.
I remember that. I just ran away. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here. I'm just gonna die.
I messaged Justin because I was like, Is he upset about this, or does he think it's cool? Like, where's he stand on this situation? Because he probably told you about it.
I'm not upset at all. I think that's fun. I like it when amazing things happen. So, I like it more if I'm the one doing it. But if I'm on the receiving end, I still think it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather lose fast than lose slow, I think.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. 100%.
So going back to like trying to rein in some of the strong stuff or balance deck building, I think it'd be a shame to Like I think it's important to try to keep things somewhat balanced, but I think it'd be a shame to balance it by eliminating some of the fun combos. I think with Blood Summon, an idea that's been floated around a lot has been restricting it to say three units, on a play. Would certainly work, but it takes a lot of the fun out of it. So I wonder if there isn't a better way.
Well, the other idea that's been floated around has been banning it. So,
Or one possibility is just removing the ability to damage stuff without summoning something too, because that's something people can do.
I mean, I think that makes sense just for thematic reasons. I don't think that does a lot to constrain it, but it's a step in the right direction.
It wouldn't mess up your big hand type of thing, but it would
Right.
kind of reduce the warrior combo.
I'd rather see cost increase than take things away. Like Brub is terrifying, but that doesn't mean I want to see it capped at, some number of rolls.
Like 4 attacks or something.
Right. It would take a lot of the fun out of that.
The thing is, like, we talk about, when I read through the Discord and all the people hate Blood Summon and all that kind of stuff. That was one of the reasons why I stopped playing it. But there's all the other stuff in the game that is also super hard and annoying to deal with. Like, you guys talked about Valeria with the Deceiver and Arbiter of Peace. Like, that's that's incredibly strong and hard and like almost impossible to deal with if you're playing certain decks. So I kind of feel like going down this road of trying to balance things is a little bit tough to do when I feel like the bigger problem is that there's not enough people playing Deck Builder online. Right? Like maybe like there's some structural change they can do to encourage more base deck people to come to the custom side, or there's something they can do to get more people onto the online platform. I feel like that might be a better use of time than going through and doing this stuff. Because like you said, there's only like less than 100 people playing custom right now. It's just 100 of us.
We don't necessarily know why more people aren't. It would be kind of hasty to make a change that's misguided.
Yeah, and I don't think James or I have ever been on the train of like, hey, we need to ban cards, because there's a lot of things in deck building that are very strong. Blood Summon being unlimited might not be the best going forward, because unlimited anything can be tough, but I don't think we've ever been on the side of like, hey, Blood Summon's way too strong, let's ban it, or other cards even before Blood Summon were around and really being used a whole lot. People were saying they should ban, although no one's ever said they should ban Brutal Force.
That's what I was going to say, is that there's been, we've only had 2 of these big deck building tournaments, and Shadow Elves haven't been at the top of, or the runner-up of either of those tournaments. So that's why I kind of just want to run more tournaments and see what shakes out. There were no Blood Summons, there were no and even like the first tournament that Aaron ran his Cave Goblins with Brutal Force. Cave Goblins were the most popular deck, but if you go through all those deck lists, no one else was running Brutal Force.
Not a single one of them.
So I think there's a lot to be explored because we don't have the same player base that the others do, that the base deck does. So we don't even know what's good. So why should we ban something? I mean, I think we kind of know what's good, but I still think like if we had a larger player base or some of those other base deck players jumped over, we'd get more data and more information about what works and what doesn't, and just more different takes on what would be good, and we could see more different decks. Because I think it's funny, like I don't know if he'll listen to this one, but I think it's funny Vexer was like kind of disillusioned and saying, oh, we have to play the same 5 decks in base deck all the time if you want to have a chance at winning a tournament. And I was like, well, maybe he should just jump over to deck building and give that a shot. Because the big reason a lot of people don't want to do deck building, they say, is because there's too much to learn already with base decks. And I was like, okay, well, come over here. The water's fine.
How much do you think those players like the rankings play into where they spend a lot of their time? Some of these top guys on the base side, like, do they care so much about their ranking, or is that just?
Honestly, I think because there's no ranking decay, I think some of them get to a high point and then just stop playing. Like, I don't think, like, I look at the number, and I don't think Vexer's number has changed in like a month. So I don't think Vexer has even played, for example. But then there's some others that their numbers haven't changed a lot either. So I think some people will get to a good spot and just sit there, or they'll just play what they like and just keep playing, Groaks or whatever, and just try to do well. I think ultimately most people are just playing the game for fun because there aren't wild prizes.
Although a lot of people, I think, jumped in the last deck building tournament because there were prizes involved. Plaid Hat likes to offer a first and second place for most of their tournaments for prizes. Normally it's like $90 Plaid Hat gift card online for
First place.
like 50 or something for second place or something like that.
So it's easy to go infinite if you can get one of those top 2 spots.
Yeah. A lot of people who we kind of like tried to talk into deck building, I think, joined because they're like, well, it's gonna be a smaller pool. Maybe I got a shot to win the tournament or like have a shot at getting one of those prizes, and I can maybe get a new game or maybe pay for some decks or something.
Prize pool, like set it up like a sit and go tournament, like a poker tournament. Everyone chips in $5.
Yeah, there's other ways I think they could get people involved in deck building, and I don't know if they'll go this route or not, but they could add in badges that are like deck building only besides like the placement badges. Because really right now the only badges you can earn for deck building are like, are you top 10? Are you top like 10%? And a lot of people also badge chase in base decks. You could earn some of the faction badges with deck building also. You could say like, oh, I won 5 games with Cave Goblins or something. I think those still count, but a lot of people like want to be in the top 10 for a faction, and that's not really a thing for deck building. But I think if they added badges, even badges that are like, hey, this is a badge for winning 20 deck building games, I think then you might see some people come over just to be like, oh, that badge looks pretty cool. I want to see if I can get it.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Or they could even do like, hey, if you play 20 deck building games, you get a free deck.
Yeah, the online stuff doesn't matter to them. Not that it doesn't matter, like it doesn't cost.
There are people who just play, I don't know how many. I'm sure Plaid Hat has these metrics, but there are some people who just play free decks. Like you get your one free deck, and then you get like one deck that rotates right now for free. So you have 2 decks to choose from. And I don't know how they do that in deck building. If you're
probably just limited by what decks you have available, which would make it harder to deck build.
Maybe that would be a tough aspect. Maybe they open up all decks free for deck building or something. Playing the deck building aspect, you can use any deck despite not having it in the base decks. I don't know. There's other options they can explore to try and entice people over to the deck building side.
It's interesting, like I said earlier, if it wasn't for deck building, we would have moved on to something else a long time ago. And I just wonder if that's true for other people too, or not. If they're going to make changes like this, it should benefit Plaid Hat in some way. So if it extends the lifetime of a user, I would think that they would care about that. But I just don't know if that's true or not.
I feel like it is, but not for that many people. Like there's a couple other people that we know for sure that basically only play deck building.
Yeah, like Turtle Freak.
Yeah, like Turtle Freak. I feel like there's like for those people it would definitely have that aspect of like extending their life with this game and making them stay entertained. But I don't feel like with the current like 30 or 40 or 50 or however many people that deck build, like it might be like 5 or 10 people. And so I don't know where Plaid Hat is at with that aspect.
I think what I mean is like, say the 600 or so base deck users, right? Maybe there is some lifetime value associated with playing base. If you got them over to custom, I'm just theorizing that would extend the lifetime of that user, because there's more to do. If that's true, then there's a reason to do it. If it's not true, then there's not really a reason for Plaid Hat to do it, right? So,
or even people outside of that 600, you could be saying that would be more interested if they knew deck building was a thing, or were into, or if that's something they enjoyed, right? Or
yeah, totally.
No, I think that definitely is a good point. I think that could extend the life of the game for some people in base decks. I just don't know if there's a way to measure how many people that would be or like what impact that would have. But I think it's definitely something Plaid Hat should look into.
You can see how many people play deck building, so it'd be pretty easy to compare. You have to see if that number jumps. If like you said, they offer a free online deck if you play a certain number of deck building games, and see if the number of people playing deck building goes up after that. Or like if you add in some pre-built deck building decks and see if the number goes up. That wouldn't be too hard for Plaid Hat to track if those things make a difference.
I don't think it would be either. I think it's definitely something they should try out. We'll see if we can pitch it to Joe.
Put in the suggestions box or whatever.
Joe's talked about he wants to at some point automate tournaments so he doesn't have to actually like set them up. People can just join tournaments that are waiting for them. So that'll be interesting if there will be like smaller tournaments of like 30 people that you can just join and play and anytime that you want.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about, how like it only shows your last 1,000 games, or maybe you two don't know that because you haven't played online enough yet. But it shows your last 1,000, and I no longer have any tournament games in my last 1,000.
Wow.
James plays a lot.
It's been too long since a tournament, guys. Too long.
When was the last tournament?
The Mountain Vargath and Crimson Order release tournament, which I think was probably the middle of the last season.
4, 5, 6 months?
Yeah, something like that.
So you played 1,000 games in like 5 months?
I guess so. A lot of them have been because they added the 45-minute queue, and I've played a lot of games there.
When we have Joe back on, we should ask him about our games again because I'm curious. Maybe you're catching the leaders.
Yeah, maybe.
It'd be nice too if they had on the history, if they had like a date or a timestamp or something, because when we look back on there, I'm like, I have no idea when this was.
Mm-hmm.
At least the season.
Yeah, I'd like a season breakdown too, so you could just look at. So if you're looking at how your stats varied by season or something, I finally started to get a little better with Polar Dwarves, and that was just this season. I did really poorly with them last season. I kept trying to get a gold badge with them.
So, Dave, what do you dislike about the base decks? Because you're now being punished by being forced to play the base decks. What aspects do you... Because Justin plays base decks a bit, so, like, why don't you like base decks at all?
It's not that I don't like them. It's just like, it's more, I just feel like it's more of a chess match. A little bit more nuance involved, and honestly, like, I'm prone to make mistakes. You know what I mean? Justin knows better than anyone. Like, I've half the games that I've lost against him, it's because I've made a mistake. I feel like in the base ecosystem, you have to play a little bit more perfectly, right? And then on custom, I can get away with not doing that.
Have you tried out like a fair amount of the base decks, like in person or on the app? You said you're playing Crimson Order,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like based on what I've gathered from your playstyle, that doesn't really fit your playstyle. It seems like more of a Justin playstyle where you slowly choke out your opponent and you just take over the board with a bunch of cultists. But
when we get the new factions and when they get released, all the factions, we've basically sort of split them. We don't really overlap a lot. And when the Crimson Order came out, again, like we play a couple of base games against each other before we move back to deck building. For whatever reason, I really struggled with them, and Dave crushed me with them. So it became one of his decks. I feel like that might have played into his decision to go to them, even though they don't really match his play style. Dave, you can say more there.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's, I've just been on the struggle bus playing to the end of the deck. It's just like, it takes forever, and you have to pay attention the whole time.
Like I think the play styles it matters a lot. I mean, one of the decks I played on the base is Fallen Kingdom, and man, they're not my style at all. My two favorite games that I've played ended up with Ritalis on my opponent's side of the board both times. Is a good indicator how badly I play them. Like I don't like sitting back.
We need to give like Eternal Council and Obsidian Dwarves a go, is what you're saying.
I do like Eternal Council, yeah.
maybe Dave would like Fallen Kingdom, though, because they have a lot of that. Like, I'm just going to blow your face up with a Purge and a Warrior and stuff, and a lot of cards that you're pretty familiar with from deck building, I'm sure. Their Summoner doesn't fly in like Salundar can. Raytalis is kind of like broken and bones and dies slowly, but, different aspects. You had Raytalis, Justin, in the back row of your opponent? That it seems insane.
No, just on my opponent's side of the board, not the back row, but I crossed over and spent a bunch of time on the opposite side of the board.
Even that's a far way to trek.
Playing control with Raytalis.
He's not winning the 5K anytime soon.
No. Raytalis rarely leaves my back row when I play that deck. I just keep him. I don't even move him normally. I don't have the movement to shift him around. I'm moving everything else. He just stays in the back and slowly falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying the style I gravitate toward is just moving forward.
No, it makes sense. You chose the Mount Vargath then out of the Crimson Order Mount Vargath?
I did badly with both of them. They both ended up being Dave's decks.
Wow. How do you get both decks out of a release?
That's not true. You play the goats all the time, right?
I've tried them, but I haven't done well with them. Whereas the Eternal Council, who were they with?
Bungledore.
Yeah, those both end up being me. In fact, Dave avoided them for a really long time. That first experience when we got them, and so that's why it's only recently that he started incorporating the card drawing into his other decks. He hadn't really played with those cards at all. Like neither one of us has the breadth of familiarity with the base decks that you guys and a lot of players online have, because we just haven't spent much time there.
I just feel like every base deck, you're like playing it and you get a card, and you're like, man, this card's stupid. What is this doing in here? Or like you just wish, oh man, if this was like, oh, this other card or whatever, that'd be so much better. Like I just feel like that's how I feel when I play the base decks. I'm just like, oh man, this could be so much better if it could just use that other card. And I think that's why I just like deck building way more. Because it's like, oh, this could be so much better. Or it is so much better. It's just no one else is doing it. Or not a lot of people are doing it, that's all.
Deck building decks definitely are stronger. Base decks really just can't compete with them. The power level is... I think that's one of the things that people feel like turns them off to deck building, though, is they feel like that they think it's super unbalanced and like the power levels are insane. And Colby calls it the wild, wild west out there. I feel like it's fairly like tight still in deck building games, and like a lot of them are fairly balanced. You'll see some broken combos that come out, but even against like some of those decks, I feel like the games are still really competitive, and a lot of the decks do really well against each other. It's just a different type of balance.
I kind of compare it to like weight classes in like boxing or wrestling or something, where you're just having a heavier weight class, but if you put two heavyweights against each other, it's still like a balanced fight, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it's usually problematic. I think it's good to be able to do fun things in the deck building side. But on the base deck, the decks have already been balanced. On the deck building side, it's very easy to create something that doesn't work at all.
Yeah, that's like the first rule of deck building is don't make a deck worse than the base decks, because you can definitely do it.
Well, have you guys tried? I haven't tried it a whole lot, but I know James has tried it a little bit. The drafting mechanism that Bob made, the guy from the community made like a drafting, like a Hearthstone sort of drafting mechanism, and you can draft decks. And a lot of people were saying, and James, maybe you can speak to this, but like that they were just making decks worse because they were just drafting cards poorly into the decks.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. James mentioned it to me, but it looked interesting. But I think I'd do exactly that. I think I'd just end up building a whole bunch of really bad decks.
I mean, it's fun when you like if you get with someone else and like, okay, we'll both make a deck and we'll see how they do against each other. And then I've kind of kept track of the records that I've got with each deck, so that I if I'm gonna play one of those decks, I can find someone who's got a deck with a similar record, and we'll pit them against each other and see what happens. There are some decks that work a little better in that environment, like Wayfarers, I think, because they don't have the power peak that some of the other decks have. Like I haven't gotten Wayfarers to work, but in draft, you can make a Wayfarers deck that works well enough against other drafted decks.
And I feel like some of the summoners with abilities that are just kind of universal work well in that format. Like Sunderved, I feel like is always not going to be a bad option because it's +1 to attack is always good. It's not a bad thing.
Sunderved was actually the most popular summoner in the last deck building tournament that came out. I think it's just because a lot, like you said, it was a simple idea and a lot of people gravitated towards it. And the tournament before that was all cave goblins all the time. Even though cave goblins aren't as popular in base decks.
Yeah, when I first started playing, actually I think I started playing online, and then I brought Justin because I kept losing. And I was just like, man, these cave goblin decks are coming out of nowhere. I think, doing all sorts of crazy shit. I'm like, what? I thought we were good at this game, but I guess we're not good at the game because I was just losing so much,
And that was last season?
Yeah, like I think the end of it is when I jumped on. A lot of the names I recognize now, like, Turtle Freak and GG. I think GG had a Blood Summon deck. I think I may have played you a Blood Summon versus Blood Summon once. I can't remember, but those matchups I actually thought were really fun. Like I kept on trying to find them again. If your opponent stops playing them, then you can't really play it again.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming on and talking about deck building. Hopefully we can continue to grow that community and get some more people involved.
Thanks for having us.
That'd be great. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
This has been Discard for Magic, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.